I was born in New York City in 1915 before World War I. And I recall some of the experiences of World War I. When I was a small child, my mother brought me up on a stage in a theater, and I had to yell out, "Buy war bonds!" I don't know how many war bonds they sold, but it was a strong recollection on my part. And I also remember that my father got picked up one day without his draft card, and they wouldn't believe that he had a wife and family, and they took him to the police station, and my mother had to go down there with me and get him out of jail because they thought he was a draft dodger, which he wasn't. I lived in Manhattan and New York City at that time, and I started drawing at the age of 2. If I wasn't an artist, I think my mother would have drowned me because she was an artist. And I put a penis on everything because at the age of 2, naturally, I thought everything had a penis. If it was a cow, it had a penis. And everything was done in a very childish manner. Picasso collected children's drawings. He was very influenced by them. I recall taking a piece of chalk and going outside at the time and drawing Kaiser Bill being kicked in the backside by Uncle Sam about 5 miles long on the sidewalk. These were early experiences, early recollections that I'm trying to recall. I was actually brought up by going to the theater every week at a very young and tender age. My mother would take me to the theater with her, and I was exposed to all the plays from Broadway at the Ford Theater in Baltimore, which was quite an interesting experience. Then the crash came, 1928, and we had to move to New York, and there was quite an adjustment on my part. And one of the traumatic experiences I remember from that was that I had to leave my dog Major behind, who was like a brother and sister to me, as I was the only child, and the dog meant practically everything to me. And it was a very sad time. I went to the DeWitt Clinton High School in the Bronx, and there were 10,000 students there, which was also quite a change from going to this high school in Baltimore. And the whole experience of New York, of this rather mild-mannered kid from the South coming up to New York with a bunch of tough kids. I guess they thought I was some sort of a sissy or something, but I really wasn't, because I soon adjusted to that sort of thing. Then I went to the Beaux-Arts at night, but before that I registered at the National Academy of Design at a very tender age. And Robert Aitken, the director of the National Academy of Design, used to be an old shack up at 109th Street and Amsterdam Avenue. I was still going to high school, and I tried to get into the life class, but he said I had to draw from the antique for a couple of years before I got into the life class and worked from alive models. But I showed him some of my drawings, and he said, "Well," he said, "you're pretty good, young man." He said, "I'm going to put you in the life class. You'll be the youngest member in the life class." And that was quite an experience. There were about 35 people in the life class at night. It was the first time I was able to draw from a nude model. And the instructor was a wonderful portrait painter named Ivan Giolinsky. And I told him that my mother had studied with him many years ago. He says, "Oh, yes, I remember your mother. She was a very wholesome young girl, like a graham cracker." So I don't know whether he really remembered her or not, but it was interesting that he said such a thing. But one of the main characteristics of his teaching was that he would go around and insult the model as he was giving you a criticism. He would say, "Now observe this model. Look at that young lady. her breasts are like dried prunes, and you don't have the character of, of her breasts in your drawing. Try to get that character.
Painting and photographs are single-dimensional. Essentially, they're flat. Sculpture, on the other hand, is multi-dimensional. Whatever angle that you look at a piece of sculpture is another experience in terms of art itself. The front, the sides, the back, looking above it, looking below it. Sculpture brings to the art world that extra dimension. And Albert Wein's sculpture has another dimension as well.
I remember some years ago when we lived in California and Albert was approached to do a logo for a new television series, and as usual in Hollywood they wanted it yesterday, and so that night he holed himself up in his studio, and lo and behold, the very next morning, after at least 6 or 7 hours of work, he had this wonderful, wonderful statue of Don Quixote. It was used for the logo for the series. I don't remember the series name, but it showed the intensity of his work. There are periods when he has a hiatus. He doesn't do anything for weeks and sometimes months. The muse is not singing in his ear, so he says. And when it does finally, he again holds himself up in his studio and no one disturbs him. He does work with music. I don't call him, I don't even call him for lunch. If he gets hungry, he comes in. If I'm not here, he fends for himself. I think the example of really the most intensity with which he worked in all the years since we've been together was when he worked on the Libbey Dam project.
The architect, Paul Theory, looked up at this tremendous wall, which was 30 feet by 27 feet, and he said, "Are you going to carve that thing yourself?" I said, "You must have been reading The Agony and the Ecstasy, the biography of Michelangelo." I said, "It's not possible for any one man to carve this by himself. I'm going to need a lot of help on this."
He worked very strenuously doing research and developing several ideas, and he was in the studio, I would say, at least 16 hours a day. There was very little social life at the time. We would talk over what he was doing. He'd come in sometimes, have me go out and look at the work that as it progressed, and we'd discuss the things. Occasionally he would take a criticism, not that I'm in a position to do so, but I've gotten to know his work very well, and I sort of know what he's looking for himself.
And it took 3 years to finish. It took 1 year to draw up the contract, 1 year to make all the preliminaries and the designs, and 1 year to carve it with 7 carvers up in Vermont, in Barry, Vermont. I moved to Vermont, Stowe, Vermont for a year in order to supervise this job, which was a tremendous undertaking. But once it was up, it was well worth it, because about 1 million visitors a year see it on their way up to Canada.
Albert Wein may not be a Renaissance artist, but he certainly is a Renaissance man. When you stop and think of his whole body of work, he has come full circle. He started off as a realist. He went on to abstract expressionism. He is now doing heroic neoclassicism. This shows that he not only has a talent for one thing, but he has a talent for all things. And this is because the man himself has so much enthusiasm, so much intelligence, and so much integrity that he cannot stop at one particular area of work. The whole world is his palette, and all people are his landscapes. He has a warmth and a humor. More than anything else, he has a penetrating intelligence, and all of this seems to make him more than an artist, more than a craftsman, more than an artisan. It makes him a tremendous human being.
We met Albert and Dana Wein at a party in the neighborhood, and when I was introduced to him, I was told that he is an artist, sculptor and painter, and we asked if we could see some of his work. Well, we have some pieces in the house by other artists. We'd never met the artists and never had any first-hand acquaintance with them to see how they thought, or what they thought about and how they acted, and what they thought about of their own work. So a few weeks after that, we were invited over to their house, and the house itself is almost like a museum. It's just chock full of pieces. And we entered the home, and I started looking at, tentatively around at different pieces, bronzes and wood carvings. And this one particular piece was at the head of the stairs when you enter the home.
This was my first introduction. It was the first piece of Mr. Wein's that I saw as I walked up the steps to the living room. And Mr. Wein named it Ponytails. And I think I was really enraptured by the piece when I first saw it. It reflected to me contentment, peace, the love between an infant and a mother. And of course, I was taken by the fact that the material that was chosen was white marble. White marble is probably the purest of all marbles, and the fact that he chose to use white marble for this particular subject, I think, was most appropriate.
I had thought that I wanted something in bronze, but although I liked the forms and the figures, this Ponytails, we've renamed it Mother and Child, just seemed more alive to us. I guess it's the material that it's made of, and we both felt comfortable with it, and it's something I enjoy looking at. I feel that it's become part of our home, and it represents some warmth and other feelings that we have about ourselves and the home and our children, being the parents of two daughters, and this piece being about a mother and a daughter.
I think it taps the sensitivity of anyone who looks at it. The material being as vital as it is, it's not just the emotional responses that I have to it, but there's a lot of physical activity when I look at the piece. Each time I look at it, I see a different face. I actually think I see muscular activity. The mother is holding the child close to her breast, and sometimes I think I'm going to see the arms go up and the child go into the air, and I might hear a giggle. It just gives me a great deal of pleasure and delight.
I also enjoy Al. I think he's a heck of a nice guy, and he's fun to be with. And there's something that lent to the piece of art by knowing Al and seeing him in his own environment. And we just have become friendly, and it's it feels like I've known him for some time, and it always adds to my day when I've had an opportunity to be with him or speak with him for a few minutes.
other times when, as I said before, when he doesn't work. But I don't think that his mind stops working. He's just not physically going into his studio. But I think the ideas are always in his head, because I often see him sitting and all of a sudden his hands are moving and he's making gestures. And I know he's drawing something. He's just drawing something in space. And it isn't too long that something gets down on paper. I think the wonderful thing about his work is that his work sort of expresses his affirmation of life. Every day in my home, I go through my rooms. I have never gotten tired of looking at his paintings, at his sculpture. I many times sit down and look at some special piece, and it sort of brings great pleasure to me for the moment. It sort of carries me through the day that I live in such beauty.
This piece represents the four horsemen of the apocalypse: war, famine, pestilence, and death. From the New Testament, the final trump, Armageddon. I portrayed the four horsemen coming out of the atomic bomb, which is a modern contemporary symbol of world destruction, spewing forth the four horsemen of the apocalypse over the entire earth. This is death. This is war. This is pestilence. And this is famine. I consider it an entirely new and contemporary concept of this subject matter, as it has been done many times in the past by Albrecht Dürer during the Middle Ages and many other artists. It is also what I feel a social statement of what's going on today in the world. I visualize this as a 30-foot high monument in the cause of world peace and against the nuclear atomic bomb. speak about art, for an artist to speak about his work is very unusual because the catharsis takes place. Most artists don't talk about their work. I mean, they say, here it is, look at it, and they react to it that way. But there are so many things going on in the art world today. Art today is like a three-ring circus. I mean, you don't know where to turn or what to look at. There are many things called art. And I look at things, I try to look at things with an open mind and an open vision. But I'll admit that as broad-minded as I am in many areas, there are many things I don't understand. It's a tough road to hoe. It takes many years of study. To be a serious artist is the goal. To become a master is the goal, not to become a millionaire. You know, and in Europe, in many ways, Europeans are ahead of us in their attitude towards an artist. If an artist is making millions in Europe, they look at him askance. The main thing is they want to know whether he's a master or not. Over here, if he's making millions, he's considered a great artist. You know, that's not the yardstick for looking at an artist or his work. You know, is how much money he's making. I don't think.